Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for joining me again. Today I've got another blues chord study for you. This time we're using that beautiful Peter Green era Fleetwood Mac ballad, Need Your Love So Bad. This progression is a fairly typical 8-bar blues in the key of A, and it's played with a real slow 12/8 feel. You'll notice that unlike a lot of blues, which contains just 3 chords, the 1-4-5, this one has that Ray Charles vibe. It's got a few more jazzy changes thrown in. And as always, we'll make sure to really delve deep into how and why that stuff works. As always, you can get hold of the lesson materials at the links in the description. I have a Patreon page where for just $10 a month you get full access to all of my lessons, past, present and future. But if that doesn't interest you, you can buy this as a one-off purchase at the Gumroad link. Either way, I really do appreciate your support, so thank you. So in this study we're going to take a couple of laps around the changes, and that will give us plenty of time to delve into some really interesting ways to approach playing rhythm for this piece. For our first time through, we're going to focus on a sort of soul, Motown, R&B vibe where we're playing some choppy chords and really letting the groove speak for itself. We're going to start on this A major bar chord at the 5th fret. And here's the rhythm that we're going to use as our template. So we're thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So as far as tone, feel and technique goes, you want to really try and palm mute your bass strings. And you want to do the opposite on your top strings. Really make them pop. Flick your wrist and hit them quite aggressively. And then cut the sound off by lifting your left hand off the fretboard. Keep the fingers on the strings, of course. If you want to see a more detailed breakdown of this stuff, check out my Change Is Gonna Come video. I do go into some real depth on it. Okay, so we do 1 bar of A, then 1 bar of A7. And we get to our A7 simply by lifting the little finger. Now make sure that when you do that, you're not blocking the D string. If your barring technique isn't up to scratch, it's really going to show there. Because of course if that's the only note that's changing when you change from A to A7 and that note is missing, you're not going to hear any real contrast. You've got to make sure that this clearly descends to this. And I'd really recommend keeping your strumming hand bouncing on that 8th note beat. That's going to help prevent you from speeding up, which is really easy to do when you're trying to play these slow ballads. On my tab sheet for this, you'll notice that for the most part we're trying to hit the bass strings together as a group of 2 or maybe 3 strings, and then think of the top 3 strings as your treble strings and hit them together. So messing around with the sort of dark and light texturally. And then that A7 chord resolves to the D chord. So the D chord is our 4 chord, the A7 is the 5 of that chord, so we call A7 the 5 of 4. So the progression so far has gone from 1 to the 5 of 4 to the 4. Now on that D chord we're just going to play this A shape. We get our groove going. And then we play one of these classic soul Motown licks. Sliding from 7 to 9 on the A string. And then going to this double stop at the 7th fret on strings D and G. Hit them again. And then do a little hammer on to the 9th fret of the D string. Make sure not to block that 7th fret on the G that should still be ringing at that point. If you've seen my videos in the past, you'll know that I'm obsessed with this idea of 1, 2, 3, 5 arpeggios, and you can see that at play right there. 1, 2, 3, 5 for the D major chord. Now we connect that to a D sharp diminished 7. We can call this the sharp 4 diminished, because 1, 2, 3, 4 is D, sharp 4 would be D sharp. And this diminished chord leads us back home to the A. Now one very useful and easy to remember trick about the diminished chord is that you can move it up and down in minor thirds. And it stays as the same chord, the same 4 notes each time, they just reshuffle and invert themselves. On guitar, a minor third is a span of 3 frets. So you're moving it around in 3s. From the 6th fret to the 9th fret to the 12th to the 15th. And then you're back where you started, 1 octave above. We're just going to do a couple of moves. We're going to go from here to this one. And then back to the A7 chord. Now this is where things start to take a turn towards the Ray Charles kind of vibe. It's that mixture of jazz and blues changes. We go from the 1, A or A7 in this case actually is what I went with on that opening performance. Either one would work fine. And then we go to the 6th chord of the key. So in the key of A, the 6th chord, the relative minor is the F sharp minor. So that's where we go. We're going to walk along to that on the bass string. Now instead of just staying on F sharp minor, we chuck this little phrase in. It's the same kind of thing we had on the D chord earlier. Barring strings D and G at the 2nd fret, picking them both together, hammering onto 4 on the D string, and then go back, always picking in doubles there. And then that C sharp note on the A string 4th fret. Now B minor, so that's the 2 chord. So you got the 1, the 6, the 2. On this chord, again, rather than just sitting on it and doing this, which is fine, it's perfectly cool to do that, or throw in the same trick you did on the F sharp minor, we go for something totally fresh. A bit of minor 9th tonality. B minor, just hit that to establish it, and then keeping the barring finger where it is, and hitting the top 4 strings, hammer onto the 9th fret of the top E, that adds our 9th interval, and then come down to this minor 7th sound by bringing the 10th fret in on the B string. And then we go to the 5 chord, E7. We're just going to grab this little 3-note voicing. It's a chunk of your E7 A-shaped chord, just the D, G and B strings of that, and then another chunk of an E7 chord on the same 3 strings. I'm thinking of the C shape now, and grabbing those notes. So again, the cage system is always going to be really useful for this sort of stuff. Just tracing along those same 3 strings throughout your 5 cage shapes are going to give you 5 really cool voicings for an E7. You could have E7 from the A shape, E7 from the C shape, E7 from the D shape, E7 from the E shape, same one octave higher, and then E7 from your G shape. Really useful to have that stuff locked and loaded. So we had B minor to E7, and then we're back to the A. Now we have a typical blues turnaround, a 1-4, 1-5. So that's going to be A to D, back to the A, then to the E7. We're going to play this. A, walk up to the D, walk down to the A, walk down to the E, and make it an augmented chord. So an E major, but with a sharpened 5th at that 1st fret of the B string. Okay, so that's the first half of our study done. That's the sort of choppy soul Motown rhythm style. Now let's get into the second part where we're going to let the chords ring out a little bit and really practice our accuracy with our picking. And not only is this about picking accuracy, you'll see again that it really puts a lot of responsibility on the left hand to pronounce your chords correctly and neatly without any blocked notes. So we're back to this A chord. So I'm thinking about this in patterns of 3 strings. So we start with the root and we ascend 3 strings. The next pattern is from the G string where we descend 3 strings. Then the B string, descend 3 strings. And then the top E, descend 3 strings. And just to state the obvious, when I talk about ascending, I'm talking about in terms of pitch. So although it may look like we're moving down through the strings, from the ceiling to the floor, pitch-wise, of course, that's actually ascending. And descending is going this way. And while we're on that subject, this is the bottom string and this is the top string. String number 6, string number 1. It's really important to have that stuff the right way around. It's amazing how many people have that flipped over the other way in their heads. Okay, so we do that pattern for the A. Same for the A7. Again, make sure that you're not blocking anything out. That D string is so important because that's where the flat 7 lives. Also, make sure you're really keeping good solid time on that stuff, all evenly spaced notes. As far as picking patterns go, you can do it any number of ways, and for me it's really a tonal thing, and it changes from guitar to guitar or from day to day, Sometimes I just want to hear more downstrokes, sometimes more upstrokes. They have a textural difference to them. But if you want a really thorough practice routine where you get to really hone in on your picking accuracy, why not try everything possible? Try only downstrokes, for example. Or maybe only upstrokes. Or maybe a direction-dependent mixture. And what I mean by that is that I'm picking in the direction of the next note, so going with the direction of travel. That would have been down, 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 up, up, down, up, up, down, up, up, up. Also practice pure alternate picking. Notice how I like to keep the hand free floating as well, not pinning it down onto the top of the guitar. Again, that's something that improves your accuracy. Okay, so practice all of those options and pick out what you prefer the feel of. Now we move on to the D chord. Similar picking style, we're adding a little trill here, where you're going from the third to the four and back. That would be like a sus4 kind of sound. It's really important to make sure that this barring finger stays firm while you add that little finger. And that can take a bit of practice, making sure that you get the strength in the pinky finger to get you a solid hammer on. And a good pull off as well. And then D sharp diminished 7. And again, move it up a minor third. Remember, it stays as the same 4 notes, they just invert. Kind of interesting. And then we go back to our A chord. This time, instead of walking up to the F sharp minor down there, we're going to do it along the A string to this F sharp minor 7 voicing. This would be part of your C shape if you're thinking of the caged system. This is a very typical jazz voicing. Root, flat third, flat 7, root again. And then we go to B minor. And then to an E7. This little trick here, B minor, we're trying to target the major third of E and walk down chromatically from the root of the B minor to that major third. That's another very typical thing in the jazz world, that sort of movement. Works really nicely to get you from a B minor to an E. The reason you'll hear it so often in jazz, of course, is that this would be a 2-5, and jazz is all about 2-5s. So I guess the thing to look out for here is that we are playing chromatically, even when we play that G sharp on the A string. Don't become too dependent on chromaticism having to exist along the same string. Of course, you can move to the next string down in this case, and I slide in to that major third of E, and I hit that open E in the bass at the same time to give us some real depth. Then climb this E major triad, first inversion. G sharp, B, E, and then bring in that flat 7 and climb the next group of 3 strings. At this point we've assembled most of an E7 chord shape within the G shape of our caged system. Resolve it to this really pretty A major triad. Just hammering on from an E triad to an A major, Keith Richards style. So just to recap on that jazzy portion of the chord progression again, you've got the 1, the 6, 2, 5, back to the 1. Now, just like last time, in these final couple of bars of the progression, we have a blues turnaround that goes from 1 to 4, then back to 1, and then to 5. And we've already established the 1. There's your A major. Then we take that top note a whole tone down, making it an A7 chord that leads us to the D major here, D major triad, again, first inversion, major third, 5th, root, 3rd on top, and then D minor. We're going to use this 4 minor as a way to get back to the 1. we're trying to trace this line along the A string at this point, and we're keeping all of those voicings on the same 4 middle strings. D major, D minor, A with the E in the bass, rather than putting the full chord down. And then A diminished is a really nice way to get to your 5 chord. That's a very common trick in the 1930s swing blues era. You'll hear a lot of 1 diminished to the 5. It's a very pretty sound. So our turnaround is this: A, A7, D, D minor, A diminished, E7 with this really rich voicing. That A diminished just moves down a semitone, and we fill out the D note on the A string 5th fret, that's your flat 7 of the E7. And you could even include the open low E in the bass if you want. And then we just want to resolve. Back to A major. So that concludes our chord study for the verses of Need Your Love So Bad. Do really put the time in and get this locked down so that we can use this as our very own backing track for when we revisit this piece later on down the line and learn Peter Green's solo. Okay, so let's have a little bit of tone talk. This is a very simple setup today, no pedals at all. This is just my 1963 reissue Gibson ES335 with my Sunbear 59 PAF pickups in here. I was on the neck pickup the whole time, volume and tone all the way up, and this was plugged straight into my vintage 1964 Fender Princeton Reverb amp into channel 1 with the volume on 6 and the treble and bass both on 4, reverb on 3. On this guitar I'm currently using 11 to 49 gauge strings. These are Diodario NYXLs and they sound and feel really good. The plectrum I'm using is a Dunlop H3, so it's a heavy Jazz 3 kind of smallish little pick. These are my favorites. Okay guys, so thanks for joining me for 20 minutes. I hope you enjoy working on this one. Please do leave a comment down below and let me know what you think. Also make sure to hit the like button and to subscribe. All of those things make a huge difference to the visibility of this channel. And again, remember that if you like what you've heard here, check out my Patreon page where I have well over 18 months worth of weekly lessons built up now. All of that for just $10 a month. It's a bit of a bargain if you ask me. Alright, cheers guys. I'll see you next time for something completely different. Take care.